there to hear from God's word.
Bonnie, there's a package for you.
Oh, thank you.
Hi there, I'm Lily Pad. Let's play.
Oh, extinction, not again.
Bonnie, screen time's over now.
Okay.
I want to talk to you, device.
Please, call me Lily.
Me and the toys have been working all summer to try and get Bonnie to make friends.
Yeah.
But then you had to ruin
Got it.
You're not even listening to me.
I'm always listening. See?
Now look here, me and the toys have been working all summer.
Now in Spanish.
Con los gemelos Jordan, al otro lado.
What?
Yeah, I got dibs on behind the dresser.
Jesse, hello?
Is it as bad out there for toys as they say it is?
We're finding more abandoned toys each day.
We're down!
Tech's invaded our house, too.
I don't know, Jesse. Toys are for play, but tech is for everything.
I'm losing Bonnie to this device.
You got a friend in
Woody!
Came here as fast as I could.
Why are you wearing a dress, Woody?
It's called a poncho, Forky.
Someone needs a brown marker.
Halt! Who goes there? Whoa, whoa, whoa! I come in peace.
It's been too long, cowboy.
What are you, some sort of old man toy?
What?
She thinks you're old because you're bald, Woody.
Bonnie needs help from someone at least from the same century. So long, toys.
We're gonna need backup. No way. She's getting away, boss! Our mission on this planet is to make a child happy.
Bonnie still needs us. Come on, Bullseye!
Buzz, you stay here. I'm going with them.
You don't think I can do it?
No!
Nice poncho.
It's good to see them fighting again.
It sure is.
Great to welcome you this morning. My name is Rick. I'm another one of the pastors here. And at one time or another, you may have experienced this. You're sitting in a restaurant, and you look around, and at a nearby table, you see a family of 5 out for a meal together. What are they doing? Well, mom is scrolling, dad is answering emails, one teenager has earbuds in, another is watching TikTok, the youngest child is playing a game. 5 people, 5 screens, almost no conversation. Everyone is connected, yet no one is connecting. Researchers tell us that Americans now spend several hours each day looking at screens. We have more ways to communicate than any generation in history, yet studies continue to report rising levels of loneliness, anxiety, and isolation. And that raises an important question. Could it be that while technology has connected our devices, it has quietly disconnected our hearts? And that's one of the ideas touched upon in Toy Story 5. This is, as the title suggests, a movie about toys. In the movie, the toys aren't competing against each other. They're competing against a screen, against a tablet. They're competing against the digital world that is capturing children's attention. Whether you've seen the movie or not, the question it raises is one each of us should answer, and that is, what has my attention? What has my attention? And whatever that is that something that's drawing me closer to God or pulling me away? Brings us to the story we're looking at this morning. It's in Luke 10, verses 38 to 42. And the setting for this story is a dinner being held in the home of Mary and Martha and their brother Lazarus, although Lazarus isn't mentioned here. The focus instead is on his sisters, Mary and Martha. In Luke 10, beginning at verse 38, we find these words. As Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet, listening to him while he taught. But Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, "Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me." But the Lord said to her, "My dear Martha, you're worried and upset over all these details. There's only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her." Now, as you read that story, more likely than not, you're able to identify with one of the two sisters. Some of you, because of the way that God has wired you, you can identify with Mary. Mary, the sister who sat and listened and learned at the feet of Jesus. Many more of us, I believe, can identify with Martha, the sister who was busy. I'll share my personal bias with you, and I tell you that this story from Luke has always kind of bugged me. I feel like the problem with the world is we need more Marthas. We already have plenty of Marys. We need people who don't just sit around, but people who get up, get busy, and get things done. I look at this story, and I look at Jesus' words to Martha, and I'm tempted to feel like maybe, just maybe, this was the only time when Jesus maybe got something wrong. You look at Martha, you look at her work ethic, and you realize that she is the model American worker. In preparing for this weekend's message, I was reading, and I learned that when it comes to hard work, there are 134 countries around the world. Count them, 134 countries that have laws to set a maximum length that a work week can be. Laws to limit how many hours in a week a worker can work. Now, it may not surprise you to find that the United States is not one of those countries. In the U.S., 86% of males, 67% of females work more than 40 hours a week. Among Americans, for the most part, the 40-hour work week is a thing of the past. Americans on average work 137 hours per year more than Japanese workers, 260 hours per year more than British workers, 500 hours per year more than French workers. And I know many of you hear that and your response is, well, God bless America. But is it a blessing? The Chinese word, or I should say the Chinese character for busyness, is a combination of two other characters, and those two characters are the characters that represent heart and murder. Heart and murder. Now ponder that for a moment. The Chinese character for busyness depicts the fact that busyness murders the heart. And that may be what Jesus is warning us against here. The story of Martha and Mary is not given in order to tell us don't exercise hospitality or don't serve. Jesus never said to Martha, hey Martha, chill out, kick back, take it easy. He never said, Martha, me and the 12 guys who are traveling with me who just dropped in unexpectedly for dinner, we don't need to eat, so don't worry about it. Jesus didn't condemn Martha's preparations, but rather her priorities. The story's not given as a warning against serving. It's given to warn us to not get so busy in doing things for Jesus that we sacrifice spending time with Jesus. In the story, Jesus talks about the one thing worth being concerned about, which begs the question, what is that one thing? And to answer that question, I want to look quickly at two passages that give us a pretty clear picture of what our priority, what our one thing as followers of Jesus ought to be. First passage is Matthew 22, 34 to 38. And there we read of a time when the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees with his reply. And so they met together to question him again. One of them, an expert in religious law, tried to trap Jesus with this question. He asked him, Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses? And Jesus responded to their question about which commandment was most important with this answer. He said, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. When it came to the question of which commandment is greatest, Jesus told them that it's to love your God with your whole being, your heart, your soul, your mind, all that you are. He said, this is the most important thing, more important than anything else. The first thing, the one thing, is to love God. Now, the other passage I want you to look at quickly is Matthew 6, starting at verse 25. In this passage, Jesus addresses many of the issues which preoccupied the minds of his listeners. Questions like, what are we going to eat? What are we going to drink? What are we going to wear? Same questions that still occupy the minds of a lot of people today. And Jesus points out that God knows our needs, and he will provide for us in the same way that he provides for the flowers of the field, the birds of the air. Jesus tells us that instead of worrying about these things, what we should give our time and our energy and our attention to, what he tells us to seek after in Matthew 6:33, is to seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness, and all these other things you're worried about, they'll be taken care of as well. If we place our focus on his kingdom, if we place our focus on his righteousness, which, by the way, goes hand in hand with loving God with all our being, he says if we have that love, then we'll be concerned about the things that concern God, the things of his kingdom. We'll have a desire to please him in our lives, which means we'll cooperate with his Holy Spirit as he works to conform our character to the character of Jesus. The one thing that Mary had chosen wasn't just sitting, it wasn't just listening, and it certainly wasn't avoiding serving. The one thing she was focusing on was her relationship with Jesus. And that, he tells us, is the one thing that can't be taken away. The one thing is Christ and his kingdom. And if that's our number one priority, then everything else will flow out of that. What was it that caused Martha to miss the one thing? Well, verse 40 tells us that simply that she was distracted. And the problem with distraction is distraction keeps us from what matters most. It keeps us from what matters most. So let me ask you a question this morning. My question for you, to make it personal, is, are you distracted? And before you answer that, let me give you kind of a short self-evaluation. I'm going to ask you 6 questions, and I want you to consider whether any of these 6 are true of you or not. And at the end, I'll ask you to raise your hand if any of these are true of you. So number 1, is this true of you? I check my phone in bed right after I wake up in the morning. Anybody here ever do that? Number 2, I check my phone without a reason, just out of habit. Why do I do this? I don't know, it's just something I do. Number 3, I check my phone while eating, while watching TV, while sitting at stoplights, while in conversations with others. Now, aside from the fact that one of these is illegal, what it's revealing is that while I'm having conversations with real-life flesh and blood people, I'm really not totally interested in what they're saying because I'm checking my phone, not paying total attention to the person I'm conversing with. And number 4, I frequently leave social media feeling more anxious, more sad, more fearful than when I started. Number 5, I constantly look for new content to consume even when I'm tired. I mean, I know I should be going to bed because I'm totally exhausted, but there might be something else on the doom scroll for me to watch, and I don't want to miss it. And lastly, I suspect my inability to focus leads to higher levels of stress and anxiety. Now, let's be honest. If any one of those 6 things has been true of you in the last 6 months or so, would you raise your hand now if it's been true of you? Okay, a lot of hands raised. My hand is up as well. We are living in what sociologists have dubbed the age of distraction. Now, why do I say that? Well, check this out. Brand new stat just out. The average American now checks their phone 96 times a day. This is an average of once every 10 minutes during your waking hours. That's the average, and I know some of you are above average. Now, if you're doing that, what are you consuming? Well, you're tapping into algorithms that have figured out how to get you addicted. They're not just interested in viewership numbers, they're interested in your addiction. They've discovered that when they feed you emotionally charged content, you are more likely to click, you're more likely to engage, you're more likely to share. And that prompts feelings like anger and anxiety and depression and irritability. And the result is that distraction keeps us from what matters most. Now, back to our story. We're told that Martha was distracted. Martha was busy. Busyness certainly isn't always sinful, but busyness can crowd out intimacy. Someone once said, if the devil can't make you bad, he will make you busy. And some of us, and I won't ask you how many, but some of us are in the habit of making New Year's resolutions. I'm not going to ask you what resolutions you made or how many you've already broken, but I will just mention that as we entered this month of July, whether you knew it or not, we passed the halfway point of 2026. And so I suggest to you that if summer for you means a little bit slower pace of life, it might be a good time to pause this week and just do a mid-year checkup on how you're doing when it comes to the things that you would say matter most in your life. How are you doing when it comes to time spent with the Lord? How are you doing when it comes to spending time in His Word, spending time in prayer, spending time with others in his family, spending time with your own family. Sometimes the greatest enemy of the best things isn't bad things, it's good things. Again, distraction keeps us from what matters most. And the thing about distraction is it rarely announces itself. It doesn't typically phone ahead. Instead, it quietly steals our attention. We don't drift away from God overnight. We simply become busy. I mean, contrast these two sisters, Mary and Martha. Mary chose presence. She sat at the Lord's feet. Martha shows productivity. She was distracted, hard at work in the kitchen. What Martha was doing wasn't a bad thing, it just wasn't the best thing. Second truth we're reminded of in this story is that disconnection weakens our relationships. Disconnection weakens our relationships. There was a book that came out, became a bestseller about 20 years ago, and the book was called Never Eat Alone. And the author's argument is that we ought to try and turn routine events like breakfast or lunch or coffee into opportunities to connect with other people and to expand our circle of relationships. Well, that was 20 years ago. I'd suggest to you if that author wanted to write a sequel today, he could call it Never Eat on the Phone. Because according to recent research, 1 in 3 Americans cannot eat a meal without being on their phone. 29% say their phone is with them for every single meal they eat. And that's the reason why we made one of the next steps on the back of your connection card for this week, is for you to take the challenge and try and eat one meal this week with all screens turned off. And some of you look at that and you think, Pastor Rick, one meal? What kind of wimpy challenge is that? Why didn't you make it to eat every meal this week? Others of you look at that and think, one meal? Does it have to be the entire meal? Couldn't I just eat dessert with my phone off? Well, I just say to you, whatever's going to be a challenge, make it a challenge and take the challenge. Secondly, because disconnection weakens our relationships, I would challenge you to just read through the Gospels, study the ministry and method of Jesus with individuals, and one thing you'll quickly see is that Jesus was always interruptible. He was always interruptible. And what I mean by that is people came before his schedule. He knew that real relationships require time. They require presence. They require conversation. They require listening. When we take our focus off of Jesus, it's easy to become distracted. And something that can sadly feed into our distraction is the danger of comparison. Comparison. And what I mean by that is I really don't think Martha really minded all the hard work she was doing until she looked over at her sister Mary and began to think, hey, what about her? Martha made the mistake of comparing everything she was doing for Jesus with everything which from her point of view, her sister Mary was not doing for Jesus. And then she asked the Lord to step in as a referee. And a lot of us can fall into the trap of doing the exact same thing that Martha did. And that is assuming that the way that we're serving the Lord is the way that everyone who calls himself a Christian ought to be serving. And if they're not doing what we're doing, well, you know what? They're just slackers. Problem with comparing is that it takes our focus off of Christ and it puts it on to others. The Christian life might not always seem fair. I mean, think of it. Some of us will struggle and suffer. And others will appear to be immune. They'll seem to skeet through life with no suffering at all. Some of us seem to give and give and give and serve and serve and serve, and others seem to just take and take and take. Some of us are barely making ends meet while others are living with abundance. Nevertheless, our calling is not to compare, but instead to follow Jesus with wholehearted devotion. Martha was distracted, Martha was comparing, and as a result, Martha became resentful. Martha looked at her sister Mary, and then she began to complain. Probably started out as just a quiet grumbling in her heart, but it soon escalated into outright verbal complaining to Jesus. Because Martha lost sight of the one thing, she accused Jesus of not caring about her. She accused the God of love of being unloving. She accused the one whose compassions are new every morning of lacking compassion. And then Martha decides to give Jesus some advice. She tells him what she would do if she were him. She says, Lord, tell her to help me. She's basically saying, Jesus, we got a situation here, and it would really be great if you could fix this situation my way. When we get distracted, when we begin complaining, when we get resentful, we lose sight of the fact that he is Lord and we are not, and he really doesn't need our advice when it comes to running the world. How can you and I keep the one thing the one thing? How can we keep what happened to Martha from happening to us? The short answer is by doing what Mary did. The only thing that's needed to turn distracted busyness into devoted discipleship is time spent sitting at the Lord's feet, sitting and listening to Jesus. Our memory verse for this week comes from Psalm 46:10, and it's the challenge to do what Mary did in the story, and that's to be still and know that I'm God. And that's God's invitation to us to reconnect with him. And in the same way, Jesus invites us to reconnect. We look at these two sisters, Mary and Martha, and it's tempting to look at them as an either-or proposition. I can either sit or I can serve. And if that's the message we take away, I think we're taking away the wrong message. Because offering hospitality like Martha did is a good thing. Serving like Martha did is a good thing. What the story is warning us against is much more subtle, and that's the danger of distracted service. The danger of becoming so busy in what we're doing that we actually lose sight of who it is we're doing it for. How do you avoid falling into that trap? I think it begins with prayer. Assuming that you've even had the beginning of an understanding of what the one thing here is that Jesus is praising Mary for, what you need to do is ask God to help you make that one thing a priority for you. Ask him to give you a heart that's committed to keeping the main thing the main thing. It's tempting to look at the story we've looked at this morning, the story of Mary and Martha, and see Mary as the spiritual one, the sister who had her act together, and to judge Martha harshly. But Jesus never said to her, Martha, we don't need to eat, so don't worry about it. He didn't condemn her preparations, he just corrected her priorities. You read through the Gospels and you'll find that we meet Martha again in John 11. You'll remember that their brother Lazarus got sick, and his sisters Mary and Martha called for Jesus, but Jesus delayed in coming, and the result was their brother Lazarus died. And when Jesus finally arrived, it was Martha who went out to meet him, and at that meeting she made some remarkable declarations of faith. She said she knew that God would do whatever Jesus asked of him. She confirmed her belief in the resurrection of the dead, and she proclaimed Jesus as the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God who'd come into the world. And then she went and found her sister Mary. She didn't find Mary for the purpose of telling Mary to get busy setting the table. She told Mary that she should go out and meet with Jesus, because at that point she had her eyes on the one thing. Now that didn't mean she changed who she was and stopped serving. In fact, in the very next chapter in John 12, Jesus comes to her house again. This is just a few days before his crucifixion. And John records it this way. It says, Jesus, therefore, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they made him a supper there. And what was Martha doing? Martha was doing what Martha did best. Martha was serving. Only this time she wasn't distracted or comparing or complaining or giving Jesus advice. She was using her gifts and her resources for Christ and his kingdom. I pray that God might use her example to teach us a lesson in priorities as we seek to keep the one thing the one thing. Would you pray with me together? Let's bow together. Father, thank you for creating us for relationship with you and relationship with one another. And forgive us for allowing the noise of life to crowd out your voice. We confess that our attention has often been captured by lesser things, while sometimes neglecting what matters most. So we ask that you draw us back to yourself, that you'd restore broken relationships, that you'd help us to be fully present with our families, our friends, and our church. And for those of us who've become spiritually disconnected, may today be the day that they discover the grace, the forgiveness, and the new life found in Jesus Christ. We ask this in his powerful name. Amen.